guys! Today we'll be covering the manhwa, Dear Villainous Husband. The one to be obsessed with is over there. If you enjoy the video, please remember to like and subscribe as it really helps our channel grow. Let's get started, shall we? Our story takes place in the Actilus Empire, a society in which birth order doesn't matter. Only the strongest heirs can ascend to the throne. Which basically means from the moment children are born into the Imperial family, it's a fight to the death. And the last one left standing becomes Emperor or Empress. Yikes, not exactly the ideal environment to raise a child, don't you think? Maybe because of that environment, our story begins at a time where the Emperor's youngest managed to secure his position as Crown Prince at the blood succession ceremony by murdering all his older siblings. At the age of just 13, he dragged their bodies before his father, who praised his son for his cunning and strength. But before he can even finish his sentence, the prince plunged a sword into his chest. Watching his father fall to the ground, young Prince Hongji smiled. Waiting to inherit the throne would be boring, he said, so he decided to speed up the process. And because this is the most messed up empire imaginable, everybody simply accepted him as their new ruler. That budding young psychopath is now known as Emperor Actilus Lanius, and he is about to tie the knot with our protagonist. That's right, our girl has the worst luck in the entire world and has ended up sold to the Emperor as a bride. Even the priest seems terrified of him and urges her to hurry up and make her vows quickly so she doesn't irritate him. When it comes time for the Emperor to swear his loyalty, he only promises to give it a go until he gets bored of it. Excuse me? Does this guy even know what marriage is? I don't think he's looking for a wife, he's looking for a concubine. Anyway, the time comes for them to seal the deal with a kiss. Ugh, I don't even want to watch. Shaking, she waits for him to lift the veil, but the expected kiss doesn't come, and she looks up to find him grinning down at her like a predator smiling at his prey. He even admits that he was starting to get bored. If she had opened her eyes just 5 seconds later, who knows what would have happened? Surely he wouldn't kill his new bride at the altar, right? Right? Lucky for him, his new bride is gorgeous, so he pulls her close and kisses her deeply. As it turns out, this poor girl was actually reincarnated as the doomed bride of the tyrant emperor, a character inside a novel titled Flowers Bloom Even in the Abyss. As the story goes, the villainous emperor had an endless greed for conquering and bloodshed that could not be satisfied. That is, until he met maiden Seraphina at a temple and suddenly saw himself for what he was, a monster. He couldn't bear to stand in front of someone so pure and perfect, so he made a plan to kidnap her and corrupt her until she became as bad as him. You probably won't be surprised to hear that that plan backfired. Seraphina remained pure and perfect while the emperor became slowly more hateful and obsessed. He even ends up killing Eden, Seraphina's holy knight and first love. Understandably, Girly kind of loses it after that, and at that point, the prologue ends and the main story begins. The novel features many different characters, but among them all, the newlywed Empress is one of the least important. And the reason for that is because she's cruelly executed as soon as the Emperor meets Seraphina. She dies so quickly that her name is never even mentioned in the original. Just how unlucky do you have to be to get reincarnated as her of all people? If she had reincarnated as a more exciting character, she might have the power to change her fate, but what the heck is she supposed to do when she dies right at the start? I don't know about you guys, but I probably would have freaked out and run away screaming by now. Though that's not really an option now that they're married, so she decides to simply live like a zombie, alive but only just, causing no commotion until the day Lanius goes to the temple, and then she can escape. Unfortunately, the Emperor seems to have already caught onto her little game. He thinks she's ignoring him, and he does not seem happy. She quickly answers him, promising that she would never dare to ignore her husband. A smart move, which is quickly canceled out when she trips on her gown and falls flat on her face. Oh, girl. I think she might have to just give in and accept her fate. In the original, Seraphina was often tormented for not answering right away, so it's important that she always try to keep things running smoothly when the Emperor is around. Above all things, he despises boredom and has a very short temper when things don't go his way. Which is good to know, since it looks like she's already got on his nerves. He gives her 5 seconds to explain her actions, causing her to sweat frantically. His new wife manages to blurt out that she has a chronic condition, which causes her to faint with her eyes open. Oh my god, couldn't she come up with something better than that? There's no way he'll buy it! Plus, no one ever mentioned that when she was being sold as a bride. She quickly explains that it's not a common occurrence. She even tries to boost his ego by suggesting that his presence is so overwhelming that she fainted. But Emperor Lanius finds a way to make that seem accusatory, as if she's blaming him for the accident. She quickly bows and covers up her mistake, and this time, it seems to work. Joking that she might faint every time she sees his face, the Emperor gives her permission to keep looking at it even if she gets woozy. Or at least, that's what she thinks he said. There's a horrifying moment when she thinks she misunderstood his command, but when she looks up, Lanius is smiling. He kneels down to her level and praises her for keeping him entertained. Jeez, you'd have to be seriously twisted to enjoy this kind of thing. He warns her not to irritate him in future, otherwise he'll make her kneel and obey just like this. But since she was smart this time, he decides to give her a reward. With his hand around her throat, he allows her to ask one question and promises to answer mercifully. What the heck kind of reward is that? Isn't that just another punishment? She asks why he chose her as a bride, but Lanius quickly decides that's a boring question and tightens his grip. It honestly looks like he might kill her there and then, but since he promised to be merciful, he relinquishes her and gets back on his feet. He tells the story of how he chose his bride. Nobles from all corners of the continent sent him portraits of their daughters, so he lined them up against his bedroom wall. But he didn't care about their faces. No, nothing as simple as that. Lanius cared so little about his future bride that he simply tossed a dagger to decide, and it just so happened to land on her. Angelica Vineyard de Unro from the Kingdom of Unro, but her family just called her Angie. Lifting her chin with his shoe, ew, by the way, he warns her to keep up her behavior, pretty much outright threatening to kill her. I know he's a psycho, but seriously, just how evil can one man be? The moment he leaves the room, Angie collapses on the floor, her heart pounding. At last, she can go to sleep and have a few hours of peace before it all starts again tomorrow. Well, that's what she thought. But when she starts wriggling in her sleep the next morning, Angie hears a low voice by her ear and bolts upright in bed. Lanius is still here, and he's shirtless for some reason. Damn, did they have to make the villain so handsome? He doesn't give any explanation as to why he's half naked in her bed. Apparently, he just couldn't be bothered to go back to his own room, so he ended up staying with her. Angie is still trying to process the horrifying fact that they've been sleeping next to each other for hours, when her husband jokes that she has absolutely no poker face. Which, I mean, he's not wrong. She's gonna have to get better at hiding her expressions if she wants to survive. He also teases her for sleeping in late and starts getting dressed, calling her boring and monotonous. Poor Angie has barely been awake for 1 minute and already she's in trouble. After the Emperor departs, the head maid arrives to help her get dressed and ready for the day. A maid washes her hair while Angie tries to adjust to her surroundings. Today is May 19th, which means she has approximately 7 months before Lanius and Serafina meet. As time wears on, she's beginning to collect memories from Angelica's past. She remembers her siblings, fellow prince and princesses of Unro Kingdom. Since she's a member of a royal family, she must have received a good education. Hopefully that information returns soon because she needs to figure out which country to escape to. It doesn't have to be a rich or powerful one, since the Empire is going to collapse next year anyway. In the original plot, Lanius kills Eden, making Maiden Serafina go wild and making the Emperor lose control of both her and the country. All of which is great news for Angie. If all goes to plan, there'll be no one left to search for her after she runs away. Once she's bathed and dressed, Angie takes breakfast in her room and is introduced to her 2 main maids, Jacques Chou and Myron. They seem friendly enough, and she remembers them from the novel since they're also from noble families. Jacques informs her that she has no schedule for today, so she can catch some rest and adjust. At first, Angie is grateful, but then the next day is the same, and the day after that, and the day after that. Still, I don't know about you guys, but I'd rather sit around and do nothing for a week than spend 1 minute with Emperor Lanius. Since Angie is smart, it doesn't take her long to realize that the maids are deliberately excluding her. They're trying to keep their distance so that when she speaks up, she'll look like she's causing a problem and be swiftly dealt with by Lanius. Of course, she's not going to let that happen. The first thing she needs is an ally. In the original, Angie brought a maid from her home country, but for some reason, she hasn't been around. When she asks Jacques, the maids become uncomfortable and make some excuse about training her to the standard of the Actilus Empire. Yeah, right. The 2 of them get into something of a standoff. In the end, Angie feeds the Duchess's ego, making it almost impossible for her to say no. She may have been in the palace longer, but directly refusing a polite command from the Empress is something even she can't do. Later, Duchess Jacques tells her son, the young Marquise, about this new Empress, and how she's much smarter than she seems. You see, she actually had plans to place her own daughter Sylvia on the throne, and it seemed like a done deal, but then the Emperor chose Angelica out of nowhere and screwed the whole thing up. The Duchess is still furious, but her son, Deputy Secretary of State, assures her that they still have a chance. Lanius is fickle and puts his country above all else. If they can find a way to make Angie look like a bad choice for Empress, he'll get rid of her in a heartbeat. That's why the Duchess has been deliberately stopping her from working. It's the season of budget approvals, a responsibility shared by both Emperor and Empress. But from the outside, it looks like Angie is lazy and useless since she hasn't been bothered to work. My only question is, why would anyone want their sister or daughter to marry that lunatic? Anyway, back to Angie. She has managed to get Cisen, her maid, returned to her service, successfully securing her first ally within the palace walls. But she'll need more than that if she wants to beat the Jacques family. A summons from the Emperor has her stressed yet again. When she enters the throne room, she bows even lower than the Marquise and her maid, trying to prove her obedience. The Marquise takes the first shot, claiming there's an issue with the budget of the Empress's palace, and asking the Emperor to inspect the latest budget reports. A spending issue? That's a scheme if I've ever seen one. He announces that the Empress has been neglecting her duties, so they've had to hire people to do her job instead, draining the palace budget. Angie suddenly realizes what's going on, but it's too late. All the palace staff are allied to the Jacques family, and she has no way of disproving what he's saying. But she does still have one trick up her sleeve. Despite the short time she's been married to him, it's clear that Angie knows the Emperor better than anyone. He doesn't want to be disturbed by an issue as trivial as this. In fact, he already looks bored. So maybe evidence doesn't matter as much as his emotions. Taking a risk, she apologizes for bringing something so dull to the Emperor and proposes some fun to make up for it. And what could be more fun to a psychopath than a human hunt? She really does know him well. Since the Actilus Empire is supposedly descended from the god of war, all citizens are taught the art of combat from a young age, making them perfect for a game such as this. Angie proposes the three of them, her, the Marquise, and his mother, the Duchess, as the prey. But since she has that chronic fainting disease and only just arrived, she asks him to postpone the hunt until winter so that the competition will be more even and therefore more interesting. It's a big gamble. Let's see if it pays off. Fortunately, she read her husband very well. He seems pleased and agrees with the proposal. He agrees with pretty much everything she said, actually. While the Marquise and Duchess are dragged off screaming, she realizes that Lanius was already aware of the grudge the Jacques family had against her. But of course, he chose not to intervene. Maybe he was testing her, or maybe he just didn't care. Either way, he seems happy enough with his choice now and proves it by rewarding her with a kiss. He picks her up bridal style and drops her on the throne, letting her sit in it and even giving her a little pat on the head. I can't tell if he's really just that twisted or if he's actually starting to have some affection for her. Whichever it is, Angie has survived a major trial and forced the Duchess to step down from her position as head maid, leaving it open for Cisen. After that, no one underestimates the Empress, and things run a lot more smoothly in her palace. Of course, with the power she gained, she also earns a reputation as a cold and cruel Empress, not unlike her husband. But she doesn't have time to worry about that, because she's finally started her work, and it's a lot harder than she thought. One day, Sylvia Jacques had the nerve to come and visit her. Actually, she's been waiting outside the palace, trying to request an audience with the Empress ever since they announced the hunt. Wow, that's some serious dedication. Angie lets her in, but tells her straight away that if she came to beg for mercy for her mother and brother, she should just go home. To her surprise, Sylvia says that's not what she came for, and even agrees with the Empress's little game. Actually, she wants to take up the position of head maid in her mother's place. Seems hella sus to me. What if she just wants to get close to Angie so she can take her revenge? But Sylvia assures her in tears that her loyalty to her family comes second to her will to live. Which is kind of sad. They're both just girls trying to stay alive in this horrible palace. She stays awake at night trying to make a decision and steps outside for a breath of fresh air. And guess who shows up just when she most wants to be alone? Lanius, of course, come to test her patience yet again. For once, he doesn't seem to have any ulterior motives. He gives her a little kiss and asks her how her day went, almost like a real husband. For some reason, him acting normal just makes me even more stressed. Of course, it wouldn't be Lanius if he didn't also have some cruel news to tell her. The hunters have started training, and he took the liberty of adding a couple of rules to her little game. One is that the prey will be given weapons, so that's a relief. They only have to survive for 3 hours, which is also good news. But don't relax yet, there's more bad. When Angie tells him about Sylvia's request, he suggests she join the hunt too. But not as prey, as a hunter. If she could kill her brother and mother, that would prove her loyalty to the Empress and make her worthy of the title of head maid. Now that is seriously sick, even for him. She can tell he's not happy, but Angie doesn't dare to disagree. For someone who was born into such a cruel and evil dynasty, he had no choice but to become this way. It's literally in his blood. As if to prove it, he pours a glass of wine all over her and tells her to stop being scared for a moment. Then they, well, you can probably guess what happens next. It's a good thing for the two of them to be getting closer, but does anyone else feel super creeped out? I get stressed whenever they have to share a bed. Just imagine how scared Angie feels. A little later, he tells her the second rule he added to the game. He's going to make Angie one of the hunters. Even though he's decided that prey cannot harm the hunters, it's pretty clear that the Jacques will try to get revenge the second she's thrown in that hunting ground. He also decided that the hunt will start in the summer solstice, which is a lot sooner than she was expecting. The Jacques have already started training. Lucky for her, they're not as good as the average citizen of Actilis, but even so, it's obvious that she can't beat them in a close-range fight. Instead, she decides to focus her remaining time on learning how to use a bow and arrow. Angie is given a bow to practice with, but she soon discovers that it's a lot heavier than she thought. Or maybe she's just really weak. Even the maid is surprised to see how much she's struggling. Apparently, most children in the Actilis Empire can hold one by the age of 10. I guess Actilians are just built different. For Angie, it's going to take a little more work to overcome her physical disadvantages. For now, she's just hoping to land an arrow on the target. While his wife is out practicing some life-saving skills, the Emperor has summoned Sylvia Jacques to the throne room for a little chat. Uh-oh, this can't be good. At first, Sylvia thinks this is a good thing, that maybe he's decided to accept her proposal and appoint her as the Empress's handmaid. But when he tells her the condition, her face drops. If she wants to serve Angelica, she'll have to hunt her brother in the upcoming games. Lanius was hoping for a bigger reaction, but since she's disappointed him with a predictable expression, he has her dragged away by the guards. A butler then appears to inform him that the Empress's future social gatherings have been cancelled, just as he ordered. He also informs him of Angie's attempt to use a bow, which he takes as a sign of her cowardice. That's a little rude. Isn't it smart to learn to use a long-range weapon since she doesn't have the natural physical strength of the Actilians? But it seems even that was too much for her. The butler reports that the Empress collapsed during her training. Damn, I'm starting to think she won't survive this stupid hunting competition. When she wakes up, her shoulders are sore. Her body is in a much worse condition than she expected for a princess, and she wonders out loud if Angelica has always been this sickly. As usual, the Emperor is sitting just a few feet away, surprised to hear her talking about her past as if she didn't live it. Hasn't this man ever heard of personal space? She wasn't expecting him to come running to her bedside just because she fainted. He's more concerned than she expected. Even now, he points out how pale she looks. Somehow, he finds a way to turn that into an insult, calling her stupid and weak for not knowing when to quit. Yeah, right, as if she has the option to quit. It's exactly because he keeps calling her fragile that she has to push herself. People in the Empire simply can't understand what it's like to have a weaker body. Frustrated, Angie grips the sheets and starts to cry, telling her husband that she's trying her best. It is literally a life-or-death situation, after all. To her surprise, Lanius doesn't scold her. In fact, he reassures her that she's not going to die and orders a maid to bring cold water and silk towels. Where did this sudden streak of kindness come from, and why is he so bad at it? A guy like Emperor Lanius has probably never taken care of a sick person even once in his life, so in the end, the older maid has to take over. He explains her condition, how easy it is for his wife to contract a fever, and the maid explains that her body just isn't used to this much exertion. He's been complaining the whole day, and one look at his posture tells Angie she needs to change the pace. She asks the maid to bring some food, and 10 minutes later her husband is hand-feeding her soup. I'm sorry, I know he's handsome, but this guy is still super creepy to me. He orders Angie to stay within the palace grounds tomorrow so that she can recover, even though he admits that he kind of wanted to watch her training. He really piles on the pressure, basically telling her not to put on a boring performance when it comes to the hunt. Although she'll be acting as a hunter in the summer game, she'll become prey in the winter. Of course, she's hoping to run away before that happens, but if she wants to last that long, she needs to convince Lanius that she's working hard to get stronger. She even tells him they're hiring a teacher. At first, she thinks Lanius will be angry, but actually, he agrees that she might need one. And since the Empress deserves only the best, he decides to take up that position himself, which is just about the worst possible outcome for Angie. I mean, what if he suddenly gets bored and decides to shoot her in training? Maybe he'll underestimate her strength and accidentally crush her to death or something. Thinking of all 1,000 ways this could go wrong, Angie slaps on a fake smile and thanks her husband, promising to work hard. Fortunately, she feels a little better the next day. Maybe Lanius wasn't so bad at taking care of her after all. The servants say he stayed by her side until midnight and only returned to his room at dawn. Is this a sign that he actually cares about her? Let's not get our hopes up just yet. Cecen failed to ask the Emperor when their training would be starting, so Angie flies into a panic, trying to get dressed and ready as fast as possible so she can get to the training hall before he does. He's not there when she arrives, and for one glorious moment she thinks she got there early. Then Lanius appears over her shoulder, calling her lazy and telling her he's been waiting for the past 2 hours. Oh, that's not good. But wait, he actually waited? I didn't think the Emperor waited for anyone. He also took the care to get her a bow that's lightweight and actually right for her size. How considerate and incredibly out of character. Angie is so touched that she starts to blush, but he just thinks she's still feverish. I guess these Actilians don't have much room for romance amidst all the politics and murder. She almost thinks she got away with coming late, but soon discovers the real punishment is the training. Lanius is ruthless, and after just 1 hour, she's already exhausted from discovering all her husband's creative ways to kill. He got bored of archery practice in half an hour, so they switched to close combat, probably just so he could show off. Without teaching her a single move, he threw her a wooden training sword and attacked, dropping insult after insult about her fighting technique. Yeah, maybe that's because you didn't teach her anything. She tries her best, using pure instinct and frustration to defend herself. But as you probably guessed, she ends up on the ground with his sword at her throat. He's so fast that she couldn't even see which move put her there. Reluctantly, he helps her to her feet and starts to explain everything he just did, and all the mistakes she made, starting from the basics. He teaches her about range and attack with muscles to utilize, what postures are most effective, and even though she frustrates him with her incompetence, he seems hell-bent on sticking around. Kinda surprising for someone who famously gets bored in 5 seconds. At the end of their session, she thanks him sincerely and promises to memorize everything he taught her. As if all this wasn't already a shock to the system, he gives Angie a little reward with a pat on the head. That's it. I'm calling it. This man's gone soft. Maybe this is just me, but I'm actually more scared of him when he's like this. It feels like he could flip back to psycho mode in a heartbeat. Rumors of the hunting festival spread throughout the Actilus Empire at the speed of light. Of course, that's not the only rumor going around. Thanks to her handmaids, half the country now knows about the Emperor doting on his wife, taking care of her when she was sick, crafting a custom bow, and personally overseeing her training. It's actually a good thing for Angie. If people believe she has the Emperor's affection, she'll have more power and her position will remain secure. But when it comes time to run away, well, then it might be more of a burden. Still, for now, she can only focus on the present. And speaking of presents, one morning Angie returns to her chambers to find a small mountain of gifts from her husband. They come with a card, mentioning how excited he is for the hunting to begin in just under a month. The training ground has almost been completed, so in a few days, she intends to visit and gather as much information as possible to give her an advantage over her prey. Meanwhile, she continues to train like a madman, though there's not much improvement. Her husband is always disappointed in her performances. Maybe because he's so talented that he can't understand how a person can be so bad. Fortunately, his fickle attitude works in her favor. When he gets bored of watching her collapse, he decides to take her on a little tour of the newly developed hunting grounds. It's absolutely huge, and the terrain is very favorable for an archer. Angie can't quite tell if he did that on purpose, but she thanks him anyway. After that, Angie falls into a familiar routine and the days start to blur. She does training with Lanius in the morning and prepares for the social events of the summer solstice in the evening. Plus, the Emperor has been making more and more frequent visits to the palace without notice and giving her a mini heart attack every time. He can't seem to stay away, and every time they talk, he gets distracted by her pretty green eyes. He's still the same crazy Emperor, suddenly kissing her out of nowhere and even unbuttoning her dress in the middle of the hallway. Whoa! I can't tell if that's hot or terrifying. Maybe both? I guess that's the point. But despite his wild urges, he always knows when to pull back. Angie is surprised to find herself a little disappointed when instead of taking things further, he slips her into a pretty blue dress in the latest fashion. He wants her to wear it at the summer solstice banquet. That is, if she survives the hunt. It's a nice gesture, but I don't think a dress would be my main motivation if my literal life was on the line. The summer solstice comes around quicker than expected. Angie gets ready that morning with a strange sense of calm. From the moment she arrived in this story, her only goal was to survive. She just has to make it another 6 months. If she can survive the hunt this afternoon, then it's a straight shot until the original plot begins, and Angie has a chance to run away. Dressed in a gorgeous blue gown, she heads up to the castle balcony where the Emperor is sitting waiting for her on his throne. He pulls her onto his lap, as if half the Empire aren't standing beneath waiting for them. But we already knew Lanius doesn't care much about privacy. He literally took her dress off in a corridor the other day. He asks about her condition and runs her through the tactics they discussed. Her goal is to get the high ground immediately and avoid close combat at all costs. She never once managed to beat Lanius in training, so if it comes down to a sword fight, well, let's just say the odds aren't exactly in her favor. While they're canoodling up on the balcony, the summer solstice officially begins. They come out to the edge to greet the people of the Empire, and afterwards have a big lunch banquet with half the nobles in the gardens. But Angie is too stressed about the hunt to eat. Can you blame her? For once, Lanius doesn't scold her. He just slips a glass of red liquid over to her side, calling it a gift. Does anyone else think that's sus as heck? I know he likes her, but I still don't trust this man enough to not poison his wife just for fun. But Angie drinks it because she knows it would be far more trouble to refuse. Lanius even jokes that she would drink poison if he asked her to, and the next second her feet and hands start getting hot. Oh gosh, it's happening, isn't it? I told you guys, you should never trust a psychopath, even one who's obsessed with you. Angie starts to feel really, really sick, but the Emperor stays by her side and tells her to breathe, assuring her everything will feel different in a minute. It doesn't take long for the effects to kick in, and she suddenly lets out a crazy-sounding laugh. With a slightly freaky look in her eye, she tells the guests to get back to their conversations while she devours her steak. And the effects don't wear off anytime soon. As she's getting ready for the hunting, Angie feels strangely confident. Excited, even. And there's one last gift from His Majesty, a vial of poison to dip her arrows in. I don't know about you guys, but I kinda like this version of Angie. I mean, she's a little freaky, but she's hella confident. And when her eyes are all lit up like that, she and Lanius look like the perfect pair. The gates to the hunting grounds are opened. Sylvia goes in first, and Angie follows soon after. She gets to high ground immediately. Her sense is on high alert for the slightest sound or movement. She's so tense that she almost fires her first arrow at Sylvia, who comes out of the woods to tell her something. Before she can take 2 steps, her mother grabs her from behind, swearing to kill her own daughter if that's what it takes for her to survive. Okay, well, that's insane. Maybe she took some kind of potion too? This presents Angie with the perfect opportunity, but she has to aim just right. Her first shot misses, alerting the Duchess to her presence. Suddenly, Sylvia tackles her and starts screaming about how she has the right to live. Oh gosh, this went from 0 to 100 real quick. In the end, she does Angie's job for her, but when the Empress descends, she offers her the final blow. Taking a pretty pink dagger from her sheath, Angie kills the Duchess swiftly, hardly batting an eye. I guess Sylvia isn't quite as messed up as her future mistress yet, because she faints soon after her mother's death. Literally seconds later, the Marquise shows up. Now all the participants are gathered in one spot, but Angie's at a disadvantage by being on the ground. If it comes down to close quarters combat, things could turn south real fast, even with her freaky psycho potion in play. The Marquise charges in, hoping to avenge his mother's death. But Angie's arrow lands first. It doesn't land in a lethal spot, but hopefully the poison will start to work soon. And I mean really soon, because Angie's potion is wearing off. All her confidence vanishes, and the next moment she's trembling on the ground beneath Jacques. How the heck did things go wrong so fast? He's raising his axe above her head, but Angie is in so much pain she can't even move. By some miracle, Lanius appears at the last possible moment, taking care of the Marquise and pulling his wife into his lap. The potion pushed her beyond her physical limits, but it wears off quickly and causes intense muscle fatigue. To subdue the pain, he brought a simple painkiller and feeds it to her through a kiss. I can't tell if that's romantic or disgusting. Once she's recovered, Lanius congratulates her on surviving the hunt. Now that she's made her first kill, she's a true Actilian. But Angie doesn't seem quite so excited. I mean, who would be in this situation? Once they're washed and changed, the Emperor announces to his subjects that his wife hunted her prey successfully and has now been reborn as a true Actilian. Anyone else getting major cult vibes? The Actilians only worship power, so seeing the Empress succeed like this finally tips them over the edge into accepting her. They bow down in respect while the Emperor announces that tonight's banquet will be held in her honor. Yikes! Her plan to quietly slip away is looking less and less possible every day. Lanius is all compliments that night and even tells her that he can remember her face now. That might sound weird, but it was a major plot point in the book that he wasn't able to memorize people's faces. He just didn't care about the details. That makes Angie the first person he's ever cared about enough to remember her face. But she doesn't have much time to celebrate. The next second, they take the ballroom floor, where the Empress is supposed to lead the first dance. She didn't have much time to practice in between survival training, and when the music starts, she trips and falls over. Oh no, in front of all those people! In a strangely heartwarming twist, Lanius orders his guests not to look down on the Empress and picks her up bridal style, returning them to the throne. So he's not mad? This guy confuses me. While the other nobles are chatting and having fun, Sylvia Jacques appears before the Empress. Eager to get on her good side, one of the nobles stands up and asks them to throw her out since her family insulted the Empress. But as Angie points out, she murdered her own mother to prove her loyalty. Wouldn't that make her the most loyal subject of them all? Things get awkward for a moment, but as soon as the Emperor starts to laugh, the guests follow obediently, plastering fake smiles on their faces. As promised, Sylvia is appointed as a maid of the Empress's palace, protecting her from any future gossip or attacks. She just got appointed a member of Her Majesty's personal staff by the Emperor himself. She's basically secured her position for life. After a few hours of small talk and chatter with nobles, Angie heads outside for a breath of fresh air. Lanius finds her sitting by the fountain and asks why she seems okay. I'm sure we were all wondering the same thing. She just made her first kill, but she's hardly even shaking. I guess that's just what happens if you hang around Actilians long enough. As Angie puts it, she just did what she had to in order to survive. Actually, Lanius knew that she had no passion for murder the way he does. That's why he gave her the medicine. But he wasn't sure how she would react afterwards. He was half expecting her to hide away somewhere and cry all night. But when Angie arrived in the ballroom, looking determined despite her feelings, he was truly impressed. He leads her back inside the palace and takes her to his secret bedroom. Angie only knows about it from the book. She never imagined she would see the inside of it. I think you can all guess what he plans to do here. Angie asks him to slow down, and to her surprise, the Emperor listens. He hops into a steaming hot bath, and when she hesitates to join, he pulls her in, not caring about her pretty dress. Ugh, why do men never care about the dress? Anyway, one thing leads to another, and well, you probably don't need me to explain what happens next, do you? After several rounds of, fun, Angie falls asleep, which apparently she wasn't allowed to do. Actually, it's kind of cute when Lanius gets all grumpy like this. He's not so cruel anymore, and it's obvious that he only gets mad when he's not her main priority. He's also very proud of her for overcoming her weak physical condition and beating Actilians who trained half their lives. Though he probably won't tell her that. God forbid he ruin his moody, mean persona by being nice. While he's watching her, Angie starts to shake, clearly having a nightmare. He wakes her up with a kiss, and when he tries to pull away, she bites his lip, keeping him locked in their embrace. Okay, Angie, I see you. Our girl's getting a little more sassy these days. Even though she's awake, the dream is still haunting her. She imagined a headless prey from the hunting festival chasing after her with an axe. That would be enough to make anyone cry, so it's no surprise when Angie falls into his arms still shaking. Once again, proving that he can be kind, Lanius just holds her and tells her it's going to be okay. Eventually, she falls back asleep, and when the sun shines through the window, she wakes up to find her husband already dressed and ready for the day. She's really going to have to get better at waking up early if she wants to keep her husband this docile. She rushes to match his pace, feeling slightly uncomfortable when they head to breakfast together. The Emperor won't stop staring at her. How is she supposed to eat in peace when he's right across the table looking like that? I wouldn't even be able to swallow. Angie asks if she can go back to the Empress's palace. Since today is going to be Sylvia's first day, she wants to be there in person to oversee her training. The Emperor teases her, knowing full well she just wants a bit of time to herself after last night. That's when she notices the mark on his lip. I guess she doesn't remember the nightmare or biting him in her sleep. He catches her staring and she apologizes, pointing out the wound. Suddenly, he gets out of his seat, grabbing her by the neck and pulling her closer so she can get a good look. Ah, there he is. I knew the old Lanius was just around the corner. He tells her she's the one responsible, which comes as a shock to poor Angie. Part of her wants to deny it, but there's no way the Emperor she knows would ever let her walk away if she'd made him bleed. But that only gives him more ammunition. Excited by the idea of punishment, Lanius decides to keep her at his palace, forcing her to stay by his side. Oh, great. Looks like she won't be able to relax or eat in peace anytime soon. I guess she should be grateful it's not something more severe. Stuck by his side, Angie soon discovers that the Emperor's routine is almost as exhausting as hers. Of course, it's not exhausting for her. All her duties are over in the Empress's palace, so she kind of ends up just hovering while he writes his morning letters. At least Lanius has the kindness to get her a chair, although it seems like actually he just didn't want her to look down on him. Angie drops to her knees immediately, not wanting to earn any more punishments on top of her existing house arrest. Lanius thinks she's cute for kneeling so obediently and starts teasing her. Will she still be kneeling when the servants come in? Or will she stay loyal to her husband and refuse to stand over him so long as he's seated? Honestly, this kind of power dynamic seems exhausting. I don't know about you guys, but I would have given up and just laid down by now. I mean, she can't be above him if she's napping on the floor, right? The Emperor's attention is momentarily snagged when he notices a letter from the Temple of Tunia on his desk. In case you guys don't remember, the Temple of Tunia is where Lanius is supposed to meet the true protagonist, Maiden Seraphina, for the first time. It's located in the northwest in the middle of a desert and doesn't technically belong to any country. Those who live there have given up material possessions and sworn themselves to the god of mercy, who is not quite as popular as the god of strength and war that the Actilians worship. The letter mentions the political tension between the Actilis Empire and the Kingdom of Sombinia, blaming the Empire for causing the issue. Lanius sees it very quickly for what it is. Sombinia has asked the Temple of Tunia to intervene on their behalf and tell the big scary Empire to back off. As if Lanius would ever listen to a request like that. He doesn't bother responding and quickly gets bored of the other letters. Hoping for some entertainment, he turns to his wife, who has fallen asleep in her chair. He comes over to kiss her awake, which gives Angie another mini heart attack. She apologizes for falling asleep and asks if there's something she could help with or a task for her to do. I mean, he literally just sat her in a chair next to him for hours. She must be bored out of her mind. Plus, she needs to learn how the Empire is run at some point. But Lanius finds it fun to tease her, so he decides to ignore her, watching her freak out, wondering what the heck she did wrong this time. Desperate to prove herself, she ends up following him around for 2 days like some pretty pink-haired puppy. She even attends his political meetings and went with him to personal training at night. He doesn't make her do anything horrible, but being by the Emperor's side for 2 days straight is exhausting. When she finally gets back to her own palace, Angie is stressed the heck out. She'd been so busy that she didn't even get to greet Sylvia properly. She was even thinking of throwing her a welcome party, but it looks like that's out the window. Her other maid gives her a late congratulations on the hunt and mentions how keen the other nobles are to meet her. In fact, she's already started spreading rumors among the social circle about an event coming up next month where she'll make her official debut. Obviously, Angie is excited to have something to look forward to, but there's a heck of a lot to do before she makes her debut. She'll need to learn the ins and outs of the palace life in the next 3 weeks because after her debut, she'll officially be in charge of the Imperial household affairs. No pressure or anything. With this new life of hers starting, it will be difficult to find time to properly plan her escape. But Angie decides to focus her energy on learning the duties of an Empress first, studying every day with Duchess Nerma, her handmaid. Before she knows it, another week has gone by. These days, her head is swimming with the names of nobles, family relationships, and business details. so she hasn't been able to visit her husband as much. Of course, that doesn't stop him from coming and visiting whenever he likes, interrupting her studies for his own amusement. He takes one of the books she's reading and tells her all this is unnecessary. She's an empress, remember? All she has to do is keep her head held high, smile, and act like everyone is beneath her. Who cares if she doesn't know someone's name? Actually, he makes a good point. This is the benefit of being married to someone like Lanius. She doesn't have to bother with formalities. The ruder and more arrogant she acts, the more she'll suit the role of empress. I'm kinda jealous, honestly. Imagine going to parties and having zero social anxiety because everyone's job is to impress you? Almost makes it worth marrying a total nutcase like Lanius. He gives her permission to borrow his personality when they're in public. And if she can't do that, she should at least learn to hide her emotions, cause, let's be honest, Bestie can't keep a straight face to save her life. Although, part of the problem is that Lanius can read her like a book. Literally. He even knows a week before she does that her period is late, and when it eventually comes, the pain is so severe that they have to postpone the banquet. Cisen is going head-to-head with Duchess Nerma, who seems to disapprove of the postponement. If Angie doesn't intervene, they might go to blows, so she steps in and orders the banquet to go ahead as planned. Hopefully she'll be okay if she can get some painkillers. When the day of the banquet finally arrives, she's in a lot of pain, but she pushes through, playing the part of Imperial hostess to the nobles who were invited. Duchess Nerma deliberately chose people with ambition and power, people who are worth getting friendly with. But because they're lining up to greet her, Angie's vision and memories start to blur. She can hardly concentrate and keeps getting stories mixed up. Looks like all that studying has gone to waste, all because of Mother Nature. Panicking, she tries to imagine what Lanius would do in this situation and takes a leaf out of his book. She openly admits that she doesn't know who any of these people are and starts pointing people out to introduce themselves. She's got Lanius' attitude perfectly, even down to that creepy evil smile of his. A little flustered, the nobles stand up one by one and give their names and what their families are known for. The atmosphere is a little tense after that, but otherwise, things seem to go smoothly. Duchess Nerma is a bit disappointed that she acted out, but she was the one who pushed her to attend the banquet despite her condition. What did she expect? Sensing Her Majesty's displeasure, she drops to her knees and apologizes for pushing her so hard. Which is probably a good thing. Nerma is a smart woman. If she isn't kept in check, she might try to climb the ranks and manipulate Angie. It's best to put her in her place from time to time. Then the Emperor himself arrives, totally unannounced as per usual. He just loves to make an entrance. One look at Angie and he can tell she's not feeling well, so he picks her up and carries her away, not caring that they're in the middle of an important banquet surrounded by important nobles. The guests are left utterly perplexed, and the maid's even more flustered. Angie is also kind of embarrassed, but the truth is she's never been so happy to see her husband. Who knows how much longer she could have endured that kind of pain? Lanius takes her to the palace where Sylvia offers to take over and look after Angie. But the Emperor is far too much of a simp for that. He tucks her into bed himself while Sylvia runs off to find more painkillers. If only the rest of us could get this kind of treatment on our periods. The Emperor draws up a chair beside her bed and scolds her for pushing herself. If the nobles weren't so stupid and scared of her, they might have realized what was happening. And as we know by now, the Attilians can't stand weakness. It would have seriously jeopardized her reputation if anyone found out she was struggling. Angie suddenly bolts upright when she remembers that there's an important political meeting today. It turns out Lanius didn't attend. He wasn't impressed by the topic, so he decided to come and see Angie instead. And what was this incredibly boring topic, you ask? The Tunia Temple. Only the most important plot point of this entire novel. But don't freak out just yet. The same thing happened in the book. The only thing that finally gets him to Tunia is the hatching of some demonic beasts. The priests beg the Actilians to come and slay them, and that's when he finally meets Seraphina. He doesn't seem super interested at the moment, which could cause big problems for Angie. If he doesn't follow the original storyline, then maybe she'll come to the palace as an envoy? Knowing that the time is drawing near is making her anxious. In the next few weeks, she dedicates all her time to researching the temple. More than anything, she's concerned about Seraphina making the trip to the Empire. For that reason, she's trying to gain as much information as possible so that her plans can proceed as she intended. Finally, she uncovers the chapter she was looking for. The Saint of Tunia, that's Seraphina, is the most precious position in the Church of the God of Mercy. They're therefore not allowed to leave the temple and have no contact with the outside world. So she can't come as an envoy even if the plot does change. That's a relief. But that's the only line about Tunia in the book, so it's not exactly helpful. One thing she does remember is about the demons. The temple is conveniently set near a land where demons roam, and every now and then they creep into human territory in search of food. By the way, whose bright idea was it to build a temple near a demon-infested desert? In the end, an envoy from the temple does come to visit the palace. It's a big moment for Angie, since these are the first foreign visitors she's welcomed as Empress. On her way to greet them, she runs into her husband. As per usual, he doesn't miss a thing and asks why she didn't have breakfast. Oh, I don't know. Maybe because there's a chance you're about to meet the love of your life and cut your wife's head off? He almost tells her to go back and rest, but Angie needs to see if Serafina is with the envoy. So she joins him in the throne room where they are met by the Archbishop of the temple. With him is Eden, a paladin from the temple who becomes Serafina's first love and gets brutally murdered in the crossfire between her and Lanius. But just because he came, that doesn't mean Serafina is with him. He's a talented knight. He has every reason to accompany someone as important as the Archbishop. They've come to ask for help in tackling the beast, but Lanius won't offer his assistance without some kind of gift. And it seems he's been craving an ego boost. He forces the knights and high-status priests to get on their knees and pray for his help. They seem to be hesitating, but in the end, Eden takes the lead and kneels before the Emperor while he laughs in their faces. This comes as something of a surprise to Angie. In the original novel, Eden is a stubborn and rebellious character. He would never have given in so easily. The envoy decides to stay in the Empire for 10 days, giving the Empress another chance to practice her hosting skills. She's on her way to greet them when Lanius materializes behind her. I'm seriously starting to think he has powers or something, the way he always appears out of nowhere. He reassures her that everything concerning their guests has already been taken care of, so there's nothing for her to do. Angie thinks he's just being his usual fickle self, but the truth is, Lanius has caught on to how much attention she's been paying this temple issue. There's no chance that her old hometown had a relationship with the temple because they're very far away. He wasn't sure what sparked her interest until the audience with the Tunians when, as usual, her expression gave away her interest in Eden. Oh gosh, Angie, if she can't learn to hide her emotions, that poor man might die the same death twice. But this time for a different woman. Lanius becomes even more suspicious when she asks about the seating plan for dinner that night. Fortunately, Angie plays dumb, pointing out that she's never met these people before, and making no attempt to seat herself close to Eden or anyone else. Satisfied, Lanius distracts her from the seat plan and demands a kiss. I guess even power-crazy emperors can get a little needy from time to time. What he doesn't realize is that his wife has already ordered Cisen to keep track of Eden's every movement, just in case Serafina is hiding somewhere nearby. She ends up discovering something else. In his free time, Eden has been carrying around a strange book and always reading it in secret. But what would a holy knight have to hide? Is he reading fan fiction or something? Too curious to let it go, Angie tells Cisen to make an excuse for her tomorrow at the sparring event between the Paladins and the Actilians. She's going to investigate for herself. On the day of the match, she excuses all her maids except Cisen and heads to the palace library, expecting the place to be almost empty. Before she even gets there, she crosses paths with Eden on his way to his secret reading spot, just as she predicted. She runs out onto the path to stop him, asking casual questions about the library and his name. He seems surprisingly calm considering she just jumped out of the bushes to question him. The only time he seems surprised is when she asks his name. Not the one he took as a holy knight, but the one he was born with. Somehow, Angie has figured out a crazy secret and risked all of this to just ask that question. And what do you know? It paid off, because Eden's real name is Cha Soo-hyun, a standard Korean name that proves he's not from this world. No way! There's another doomed soul in the body of a character fated to die? Of all the characters, why Angelica and Eden? Whoever planned this mess is seriously evil. Angie immediately asks him about the book and launches into an explanation of how she came to possess the body of the Empress. Soo-hyun/Eden arrived on the very same day, which is a creepy coincidence. Angie is so overwhelmed that she starts crying, half terrified and half grateful to find out there's someone else in this world who's been struggling just like her. Well, not exactly like her. Being married to Emperor Lanius is like living life on extra hard mode. Eden admits that he's been reading about forbidden incantations. He thinks that's how they ended up here, some kind of forbidden magic that they need to reverse in order to go home. This is all a shock to Angie, who has never once thought about going home. We all know how these stories go. Usually, the possession is impossible to undo, and the protagonists just have to find a way to live as the characters for the rest of their lives. And frankly, Angie has had bigger problems. Little does she know, the biggest of those problems just excused himself from the match and discovered that his sick wife was nowhere to be found. Add to the fact that he knows Eden was excused from the match, and well, let's just say he's pretty furious. It's such a shame. She was doing so well up until now. We'll stop here for today, guys. Yes, I know you want more. Don't forget to ask for the next part in the comment section. Thank you guys for watching and for your support. Please subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. Till the next one.